To set up a game of Neolithic, first we place the forage card with its action side up off to the side of the board. Then we give each player a founder's card to start their hand. So each player will start with one of those. We then need to divide the remaining cards according to their backs. We shuffle each deck separately according to their backs, and then we lay them down to create additional piles for innovation, gathering, hunting, and procreate. These decks are called task decks and will be used by the players in taking task actions to perform various abilities and help grow their village. We will then deal 1 procreate card and 3 innovate cards to each player. So from the procreate deck, we're going to deal 1 of those cards to each player. And from the innovate deck, we'll deal 3 cards to each player. This will form the player's starting hand of 1 founder, 1 procreate, and 3 innovate cards. We then, to form the deck that will associate with our forage action card, we will then take the top 2 cards of the procreate, the hunt, the gather, and the innovate decks to create an 8-card forage task deck that we will set off to the side of our forage action card. The player who last visited a museum will take the first turn, or you can randomly decide. You are now ready to play Neolithic. Neolithic features dual-use cards, with each card having 2 specific parts or uses. One side of the card will provide icons for end-of-game scoring, and the other side of the card will provide icons or effects to be used during the game. Aside from their starting hands, players will acquire cards from the task decks in the middle of the table. Each task deck will provide specific cards, and the 5th task, Forage, is a mix of the other 4 decks. Each task will show the required icons listed on the back. So for example, for the Procreate cards, you have to play villager cards that have each of these symbols. A villager card with this hunt symbol would need to be used on the hunt deck. The same for gathering. You need 2 innovate icons in order to draw an innovate card. And then you can use either a hunt or a gather to draw from the forage deck. The way that a card is oriented when played will dictate which part of the card is being used. The used part will face a direction so that the player who played the card can read the icons or the text correct side up, while the unused part will be upside down and unreadable. Once a card is placed into a player's village or their playing area, it will not be moved or altered in any way. Neolithic is played over a series of alternating turns, and the game will end when 2 or more of the task decks in the center of the table are depleted. Let's take a quick look at each task deck and the card type that is included in that deck. We'll begin with the Procreate task. The Procreate task, when you place one of your villagers here, it allows you to look at the top 2 cards of the deck, add 1 card to your hand, and move the other card to the bottom of the deck. Procreate cards are your villager cards that give you task icons that are used to perform additional tasks. They will also, when played to your village, give you a scoring icon as well as some end game scoring. That is the Procreate deck. The Hunt deck. When you play to the Hunt deck, you will reveal the top 3 cards of this deck, add all identical hunted animals to your village, or move a card to your hand. The Hunt deck includes domesticated animals, which can be played to your village and give you an icon and an additional ability, or hunted animals, which give you meat and skins that can be used end-game scoring. In the Gather deck, you will find gathered and developed resources. When you play to the Gather deck, you'll reveal the top 3 cards of this deck, add 2 different gathered resources to your village, or move 1 card to your hand. Any unselected cards are placed on the bottom of the pile, as with the Hunt deck and the Procreate deck. With the Gather deck, you can either take gathered resources, or you have developed resources that can be played for a village action. Looking at the Innovate deck, when you play villagers that have 2 Innovate icons, you look at the top 2 cards of the deck, add 1 to your hand, move the other to the bottom of the deck. The Innovate cards have a They're generally worth points. They give you scoring icons, but in order to play this card to my village, I have to have this requirement. So for this particular wood carving card, I must have 2 collected wood resources already in my village, and then I can play this innovation down, scoring 2 points and giving me these 2 icons, which could be worth points at the end of the game. Alternatively, when taking a village action, I can discard an innovate card to activate its ritual ability. In this case, I can add the top card of the gather deck to my village as a gathered resource and discard this card from my hand when taking a village action. When playing a villager to the forage deck, must have either a hunt or a gather icon, I get to search the deck. This says search this deck for a card and add that card to your hand. This deck is made up of 8 cards, 2 procreates, 2 hunting, 2 gathering, and 2 innovation cards. When I play to the forage deck, I can search these 8 cards, pick one of the cards, and add it to my hand, and that becomes my turn. Those are the cards that you will see in a game of Neolithic. During their turn, a player has 2 options. They can either take a task turn or take a village turn. To take a task turn is to perform a task that does not already have a villager card placed to it, meaning if I am this player here, if there's a village card that is played on one of these tasks, I cannot take that action because it's blocked by the other player. In order to play a task or to take a task action, I need to play a villager card from my hand that has icons that match the required icons on the back of the task deck that I wish to access. So for example, I could use my Founder's card with the Procreate deck because it has both icons required for that action. I could also use this Founder's card to hunt because it matches the hunt deck icon. With the card that I got dealt out of the Procreate, I cannot use this specific card to Procreate because it only has one of the 2 symbols required for the Procreate deck. I could use the card to gather, and even though I have a single innovate icon, I need 2 innovate icons in order to use the innovate task. So taking a task turn, I could, for example, use my Founder's card to hunt by playing the card on my side of the task deck. And then according to the hunt deck reads, reveal the top 3 cards of this deck, add all identical hunted animals to your village, or move 1 card to your hand. So I would reveal the top 3 cards. We have domesticated sheep, another domesticated sheep, and another domesticated sheep. Per the instructions of the hunt deck, I can add all identical hunted animals. So since they're all domesticated sheep, I could use all of 3 of these cards, turn them to the hunted animal side, showing these meat icons, and add them to my village. Or I could take the option of adding this domesticated sheep card to my hand for use in a future turn. For this example, we're simply going to take the 3 identical cards and we're going to flip them around and add them to my village as hunted animal cards. Make them for their meat. My turn is now over. Play then passes to my opponent. My opponent can take either a task turn or a village turn. And looking at their hand, they have similar icons. They have the Founder with the ability to procreate or gather in this case. And then they were also dealt a communal card, which also has the ability to procreate on its own, but again, only has 1 innovate icon, so it cannot be used to innovate. We're going to take the gather action. We're going to place this Founder's card on the gather pile. The gather pile says to reveal the top 3 cards of the deck, add 2 different gathered resources to your village, or move a card to your hand. So looking at the cards that I pulled from the gather deck, we can either add 2 of these 3 gathered resources, which are these icons on the side, or I could add 1 of these cards to my hand. Looking at my hand, we have this communal who shows that I score 2 points for each hut at the end of the game. So it might be a good idea to add 1 of these hut icons, 1 of these hut cards to my hand in order to use those. So I think I will. I'm going to add the stone hut to my hand. Any cards that were not taken simply get returned to the bottom of their corresponding deck. This will conclude my opponent's turn, and play passes back to me. The other option that a player has on their turn, instead of taking a task turn, is to take a village turn. A village turn is taken when a player either cannot or chooses not to play any remaining villager cards from their hand. So looking at this player's turn, I have in my hand 3 cards, none of which are villagers. So I cannot take a task action because I have no icons that match any of the decks out here in the task row. So I have to take a village turn. On a village turn, I collect all of my villagers that have been played. In this case, I collect these 2 villagers. And then I gain a number of actions, village actions, equal to the number of villagers that were returned to my hand. So in this case, I have 2 village actions. Village actions are used to play cards to your village. So I could play an innovation, up to 1 innovation. I could play up to 1 resource card as either developed or gathered. I could play 1 animal card from my hand as either a domesticated or a hunted animal. And I could also use, I could play a culture card, which are my villagers if I choose to add the end-game scoring. And I could also play a ritual card, which are on the bottom of the innovation cards in order to score some points that way. So for example, for my first action, I'm going to play this villager down as a culture card. This will give me an icon for scoring at the end of the game, and then it will also give me an end-game scoring condition. So at the end of the game, I'm going to earn 1 point for each wood, stone, and clay that I have in my village. So we simply play that down. And then for my second action, I'm going to take this wood carving card, and I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to use it for its ritual ability. Add the top card of the gather deck to your village as a gathered resource. This card simply gets discarded to a common discard pile, and we add the top card of the gather deck as a gathered resource. So in this case, we've gained 2 wood, which is good because at the end of the game, I'm going to score a point for every wood icon that I have. I now have 2, so that's basically worth 2 points to me at the end of the game. Play will then proceed to my opponent, who has the option now of either taking a task action because he has a villager card in his hand that can be used, or they could take a village action, picking up these 2 villager cards and taking 2 village actions to play some additional cards into their village. We are actually going to pick these villagers up, and we're going to take 2 village actions. The first action will be to play a stone hut down as a developed resource. And then we're going to go ahead and play this communal villager down so that that hut is essentially worth 2 points to me at the end of the game. And also at the top of this card, you'll notice in addition to giving me the scoring icon, it also says that this card is worth 1 point. So effectively, this opponent of mine has 3 points sitting in their village. Play is going to continue back and forth with players taking either a task action or a village action until 2 or more of the task decks in the task row are depleted. Once this happens, we move to end game scoring. Having reached the end of the game, in this case the hunt deck and the procreate deck have been emptied by the players. What happens at this point is all players collect their villagers from the task deck. So these villagers are going to get returned back to this player's hand. There are no villagers here for this player, so the cards they have in their hand get played there. Both players will then take their founders cards and play them into their villages. So we play those founders cards into the villages. They will then count up the number of icons total that they have in their village, and the player with the most icons is going to score 5 points. So we look at the icons for each village, and it's important to note that icons that are on this side of the card that are requirements for playing the card do not count as icons, and the icons shown down here on the bottom of your culture cards also do not count. So for this player, we have 1, 2, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23 icons for this player. Looking at our other player up here, this player has a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24 icons. So this player will score 5 points. We'll leave the Founders card out to remind them that this Founders card will just set aside so that we don't accidentally give this player 5 points on the bottom. Players will then score points based on the scoring objectives for each of their villagers. So for this player down here, these 3 villagers were set into motion. So this player is going to score 1 point for every wood, stone, or clay. Down here we have 2 wood, so there's 2 points. We're going to get 1 point for every sheep, goat, or auroch. We have 1, 2, 3, so we're at a total of 5 points. And then we get 2 points for each wolf or boar icon. We have three wolf icons for another 6 points, so we're at a total of 11 points total so far. We then will score points for any cards that actually award points. So there's 2 points for the goat breeding, 2 points for wolf breeding, so we are at a total of 15 points for this player down here. Our player at the top up here already starts with 5 points, as the Founders indicates. And then they get 1 point for each meat icon they have, and they have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so that puts them at 10 points total. Then they get 2 points for each hut that they have. So we're at 10 points. So that's 12, 14, 16, 18 points. Each hut also adds a point. So that's 19, 20, 21. We're at 22 points. Plus they get 4 points for this advanced housing card, taking them to a total of 26 points. And that is how you play Neolithic. When doing final scoring, in case of a tie, the player with the most cards in their village is the winner. If there's still a tie, play again to determine a winner. Neolithic comes with many modular components that can be added in. The Advanced Cultures expansion, which is included with Neolithic, adds multiple options of ways you can switch up the gameplay. There are Elder cards that you can play with. If you play with an Elder card, one of the Procreate cards that you are dealt at the beginning of the game is replaced with one of these Elder cards. Elders differ in that they do give you task icons that you can use for performing tasks. However, they don't have any culture that can be played, so they're not going to give you any end-game scoring conditions. However, they are incredibly adept at a particular task. So for example, if I play this Elder, when you gather with this card, I can reveal an additional card. So if I were to play this down here to gather, instead of revealing 3 cards, I could reveal 4 cards and then take the normal action. The trade action gives me the ability to trade cards, to trade 1 card for a card of that same type. Again, it's another action that can be played. So I'll move 1 card from my hand to the bottom of its task deck and add the top 2 cards of the same task deck to my hand. This action can be played in addition to the actions that are already there. The dowry action allows you to place your villager on the other player's side of this task, move a card of your choice from their village to your hand, and then when they take a village action, the villager that you played will get picked up and added to their hand, giving them an additional village action. The festival action gives you an array of festival cards, which are additional ways of scoring points. When you take this action, you will simply add an available festival card to your hand, and that deck will be seeded with 3 cards from this deck. So you have cards that will give you additional abilities and additional in-game points. There is a dedicated forge deck. You can take 9 of these cards, or 8 of these cards, add them to the forge deck here, and then instead of creating a forge deck of 2 cards of each of these task decks, you simply discard 2 Procreate, 2 Hunt, 2 Gather, and 2 Innovate cards back to the box, and use this dedicated forge deck instead. And this is an array of different Procreate, different resources, different hunting actions that could come into play. So just some additional replayability. Finally, we have the Village Achievement deck. The Village Achievement deck is used in the solo game. You will take 3 of these village achievements, and you must achieve those 3 objectives, at least 2 of those 3 objectives, in order to win the solo game. If you run out of time and you've only achieved 1 or none of the objectives, you lose. And those are some additional ways that you can switch up the gameplay of Neolithic.